Okay, I have started recording. So,
How about the co-host?
Marge, it's not letting me make co-host. It's only allowing me to make you the host. So, would you rather you be the host or Kishori Pro would be the host?
Then you better make her because we're going to project something.
Okay, I'll make her the host then.
Thank you.
And I also. Wait, Marge, you're gonna have to. This is being really dumb. You'll have to make her the host from your setting now that you are the host. It will not let me do it now.
Fine.
I'm so
okay. Not a problem. Not a problem. We'll do that. Huh. Well, it's telling me that she has to become the host.
She is the host now. Perfect.
Okay. Nitai Gaur Sunder Prabhu, do you want to begin or?
Yes, Maharaj, it's 8 o'clock now. We need to begin. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, and good morning from our side, from Brajiko Village. Good evening to you there in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Again, we're quite honored and privileged to join you for another class on the Srimad Bhagavatam. At the request of Nitai Gaur Sunder Prabhu, we're going to speak on the same verse as last time because there's just so much there to cover. A number of devotees are joining us from various places in our region on this side. So let us start. We can chant Jaya Radha Madhava. Everyone please keep muted. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe Shyam, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo Nitai Gaur, Haribo Nitai Gaur, Haribo, Haribo, Haribo Nitai Gaur, Haribo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai, Shri Shri Patita Pavana Jagannatha Swami ki jai, Shri Shri Giriraj Govardhana ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki jai, Shri Shri Nrsimhade Bhakta Prahlad Maharaj ki jai, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Nanam Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat Nasta Prayashu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Tarane Mancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhi Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashri Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So again, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 3, Text 10, or is it 11? This is the verse. I'll go ahead and read it. Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. Word for word. Akamaha, one who has transcended all material desires. Sarva kamaha, one who has the sum total of material desires. Va, either. Moksha kamaha, one who desires liberation. Udaradihi, with broader intelligence. Tivrena, with great force. Bhakti yogena, by devotional service to the Lord. Yajeta, should worship. Purusham, the Lord. Param, the supreme whole. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A person who has broader intelligence, whether he be full of all material desire, without any material desire, or desiring liberation, must by all means worship the supreme whole, the personality of Godhead. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is described in the Bhagavad Gita as Purushottama, or the Supreme Personality. It is He only who can award liberation to the impersonalist by absorbing such aspirants in the Brahmajyoti, the bodily rays of the Lord. The Brahmajyoti is not separate from the Lord, as the glowing sun rays are not independent of the sun disk. Therefore, one who desires to merge into the supreme impersonal Brahmajyoti must also worship the Lord by Bhakti Yoga, as recommended here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhakti Yoga is especially stressed here as the means of all perfection. In the previous chapters, it has been stated that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal of both Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, and in the same way, in this chapter, it is emphatically declared that Bhakti Yoga is the ultimate goal of the different varieties of worship of the different demigods. Bhakti Yoga, thus being the supreme means of self-realization, is recommended here. Everyone must therefore seriously take up the methods of Bhakti Yoga, even though one aspires for material enjoyment or liberation from material bondage. Srila Jiva Goswami has explained this desirelessness as Vajaniya Panama Purusha Shukha Matra Sva Sukhatvam in his Sandarbha. This means that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. This intuition of the living being is sometimes manifested even during the conditioned stage of a living being in the material world, and such intuition is expressed in the manner of altruism, philanthropy, socialism, communism, etc., by the undeveloped minds of less intelligent persons. In the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others in the form of society, community, family, country, or humanity is a partial manifestation of the same original feeling in which a pure living entity feels happiness by the happiness of the Supreme Lord. Such superb feelings were exhibited by the damsels of Brajabhumi for the happiness of the Lord. The gopis loved the Lord without any return, and this is the perfect exhibition of the akama spirit. The kama spirit, or the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akama is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. Thoughts of becoming one with the Lord or being merged in the Brahma Jyoti can also be exhibitions of the kama spirit if they are desires for one's own satisfaction, to be free from the material miseries. A pure devotee does not want liberation so that he may be relieved from the miseries of life. Even without so-called liberation, a pure devotee aspires for the satisfaction of the Lord. Influenced by the kama spirit, Arjuna declined to fight in the Kurukshetra battlefield because he wanted to save his relatives for his own satisfaction. But being a pure devotee, he agreed to fight on the instruction of the Lord because he came to his senses and realized that satisfaction of the Lord at the cost of his own satisfaction was his prime duty. Thus, he became a kama. That is the perfect stage of a perfect living being. Udaradihi means one who has a broader outlook. People with desires for material enjoyment worship small demigods, and such intelligence is condemned in the Bhagavad Gita as Rita Jnana, the intelligence of one who has lost his senses. One cannot obtain any result from demigods without getting sanction from the Supreme Lord. Therefore, a person with a broader outlook can see that the ultimate authority is the Lord, even for material benefits. Under the circumstances, one with a broader outlook, even with the desire for material enjoyment or for liberation, should take to the worship of the Lord directly. And everyone, whether an akama or sakama or moksha kama, should worship the Lord with great expedience. This implies that bhakti yoga may be perfectly administered without any mixture of karma and jnana. As the unmixed sun rays are very forceful and are therefore called tivra, similarly, unmixed bhakti yoga of hearing, chanting, etc. may be performed by one and all, regardless of inner motive. Ends our purport. So we're continuing on. So this evening, I want to begin by highlighting once again Srila Rupa Goswami's definition of pure devotional service. Of course, this is mentioned in several places, but originally in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion, which he called the science of devotional service. Anyabhilasita sunyam gyana karmadi anavritam anukulena krishna nu shilanam bhaktir uttama. So there Rupa Goswami defines what he calls first-class devotional service, that one must be devoid of all material desires, first of all. Secondly, devoid of knowledge obtained by monistic philosophy. And thirdly, fruit of action. Beyond that, the devotee must constantly, he says, constantly serve Krishna. How? Favorably. And what's favorable? As Krishna desires. It's on his terms. So let's keep that definition of pure devotion in mind while we go through the verse. Desire has been categorized into three here in this particular verse, beginning with sarva kamaha. And interesting kind of translation that Prabhupada gives. He says that this is the person who has the sum total of material desires, which means maximum degree or all that we can possibly conceive of. And in one verse that Prabhupada often quotes, you'll see this in several places. It's actually from the Prema Vivarta by Jagannanda Pandit. And beautiful verse, Krishna Bulya Jeev Bhoga Vanchakare Pashate Maya Tare Japatiya Dare. And so this verse says that when the soul, the individual, actually forgets his eternal relationship with Krishna and then tries to lord it over the material nature, in that condition, which is called a forgetful condition. He's covered by Maya or illusion. So this is the origin of the whole thing. And as soon as one makes that choice, as we know, Maya has the two different kind of features or potencies. The first is the throwing potency, where the living entity is actually cast into material existence. And then the second is the covering potency. So no matter what particular form what one gets out of the 8,400,000 species, somehow or another, one is satisfied in whatever body that one finds oneself within. And then the modes, of course, they close in and they condition one in various ways. We hear from the Gita, Prakriti Kriyamanane Gunai Karmani Sarvasha, that bewildered by false ego, the ahankara, he thinks himself to be the doer, even though he has willfully separated himself from Krishna. He thinks he's the doer. And so the illusion really starts to get very thick here. As the living entity continues to associate with the modes, we hear Karanam Gunasangasya Sadasat Yoni Janmushu. Continues to associate. He chooses the association because we all have that free will. So we choose which mode to associate with. And as we do, then what happens? You get the result. You take birth, as it said, in good and evil amongst various species. So now we're falsely claiming that this material body is oneself, and by extension, we claim proprietorship over anything and everything in this world. But that's simply not our position. Very clearly, if we just understand the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna makes it very clear that that is a false position that we're trying to acquire. In fact, we understand that Krishna, Bhoktaram Jagantapasyam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, that what? That he's the ultimate beneficiary of all the sacrifices and austerities. He is the supreme lord of all planets and living entities. And thirdly, he's the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. Prabhupada often referred to that as the peace formula, because only when one understands that can one gain peace from the pangs of material miseries. In the Ishupanishad, Prabhupada really drives this point home in mantra 1, Ishavasham idam sarvam yat kinchat jagatyam jagat. And he explains that everything within the universe, be it animate or inanimate, is controlled and owned by the Lord. So that is his position. It is not our position. And what's our position? Just to accept whatever things are necessary. And that may vary from person to person. We hear about the quota, things which are set aside as our quota. That may vary from person to person. But at the same time, we keep it simple. We limit how much is actually required. You know, it's said that there's always enough for a man's needs, but there's never enough for a man's greed. The desires can go on unlimitedly, and we keep desiring more and more and more and more. So there was a funny story I was thinking about this morning. Took place in Mayapur. There was an industrialist that came to visit Prabhupada, and he was quite a big industrialist. Apparently, he owned a very large glass manufacturing factory, and so they're on a morning walk. It's quite a comical thing, actually, and the person kind of gets the courage to walk close to Prabhupada, and so Prabhupada asked him, so what's your business? He said, well, I'm into glass manufacturing. And then Prabhupada asked him, what's glass made from? And the man said, it's from silicon, Swamiji. He said, it's from sand. And then Prabhupada asked him, and who owns the sand? And then the man says, Bhagavan. Bhagavan, God owns the sand, of course. And then Prabhupada says, oh, you are stealing from Bhagavan? And the man laughed, and he kind of fell back a little bit in the walk. But then he gained more courage, and he came back, and he thought a little bit, and he came back, and he said, actually, I'm giving a lot of charity. I'm giving a lot of charity. I'm earning, and I'm also giving charity. And then Prabhupada, for the second time, said, oh, then you are just a little thief, Prabhupada said. And so everyone got quite a chuckle out of the whole thing. But Prabhupada's point was that the simple fact is no one can manufacture anything. We're simply taking the ingredients which are supplied by the Lord and then transforming them into another form. The illusion is, the ahankara dictates that we think ourselves the owners. And so that is the problem. That's our conditioning. So sarvakama, the sum total of material desires. What are they? We hear of a broad definition. Any desires which are separate from the interest of Krishna could be categorized as material desire. And more specifically, we can also classify them as various anartas. We hear Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur speak of this in the Harinam Chintamani. He categorizes this into three. He said there's something called a sat trishna, which is a thirst, he says, a thirst for material objects. And he breaks that down. It can be craving for material objects in this world. It can be anything, practically speaking. And there are so many different options one could, crave. He says it can be subtle also. We can crave for heavenly sense pleasure in the next life. Oftentimes people, they will do that. They'll plan for the future. Desire for mystic power is also another one. And finally, as Prabhupada hinted at in the purport, a desire for liberation in Brahman. This is also material desire. Because why? You want to escape the material world, and it's all about my experience. I want to be free. I want to be, experiencing Ananda like this. So he says, this is also a material desire. He has a more finer categorization. He calls it Hridaya Durbalya. He says this is literally weakness of heart. And this is attachment to things which are unrelated to Krishna. Again, so many different possibilities. He says deceit, being dishonest, is also a weakness of heart. This is another anarta. Third, he says envy of someone else's progress in spiritual life. That's quite an interesting one. That we already have become the competitors of Krishna. And then we kind of realize that's not a good idea. But then we start to compete with our fellow devotees and envy, someone who is making a little bit more progress than we are, perhaps, or is excelling in a particular area of devotional service. Maybe someone can cook better than we can, or someone can sing better than we can, or someone can speak better than we can, and so many other things. Or maybe they just have better qualities. Maybe they're humble, maybe they're more tolerant, and so on and so forth. Well, if we are still possessing the neophyte kind of mentality, we will envy them because we see them as competitors also. So this notion of being the proprietor, being the controller and the enjoyer in this world, it runs so deep that even when we are beginning to practice Krishna consciousness, we can envy someone else's spiritual progress. And the psychology is that somehow or another we have to make them look or appear lower than us. Therefore, by something we might say, that we can point out a fault, something's wrong with them, and so in this way make ourselves at least in our own eyes, feel higher and they lower. And we'll try our best to do that with as many people as we can. He says this is a weakness of heart. And then kind of tied with that is longing for position and fame. We can also bring that along in our practice of devotional service. So somehow or another get a position and therefore get appreciation from others. Our conditioned natures really crave this. And then thirdly, he has aparad, various types of offenses. Offenses to the name, of course. We know that there are the 10 principal offenses that we need to avoid. Otherwise, we can't make progress. In fact, it is said that until one can chant the holy name without offense, one cannot realize that Krishna and Krishna's name are non-different. It will remain theoretical up until that point. Something we've read about, something that someone's told us about, we've heard it a million times in lectures, that Krishna and his name are non-different. But until we chant Krishna's holy name without offense, we will not realize it. So he points this out as an anartha. He says offenses to Krishna himself, seva aparad, in the way we serve Krishna, particularly serving the archavigraha, the deity form of the Lord, and so on. I was just thinking, in the Nectar of Devotion, he says that there are two qualities that are required for deity worship: punctuality, cleanliness, and punctuality. Makes it very simple. And he also said that the kitchen should be an extension of the altar. So our kitchen should be as clean as the altar. And we certainly hope that is the case. Offenses to Krishna's devotees, Vaishnava aparad, something that can make or break our devotional service. If we serve the devotees and we are offenseless in our dealings with them, then certainly Krishna is pleased. If we offend them, basically we're finished, because we unleash the mad elephant of Vaishnava aparad that will plow through our, fledgling garden there with the little creeper and uproot it. And finally, offenses to other living entities. He mentions that as well. So this is a more kind of in-depth description of the various desires we might have. And of course, there are results to all of this as well, if we give in to those desires. Next is mentioned mokshakama, someone who desires liberation. And in this context, of course, we're speaking of impersonal liberation. We have the Brahmavadi, someone who understands or has realized Brahman is the highest and has not understood anything beyond that. That Brahman, the totality of spiritual energy, is the goal for which one should practice spiritual pursuits, so that one can become one with or merge with the totality of spirit. Of course, again, just the basic understanding of Bhagavad Gita will make us clearly understand that that's an impossibility, because by nature, the soul cannot lose its individuality. It doesn't make a difference if it's burned by fire, or it's withered by the wind, soiled by water, and so on and so forth. It can never lose its individuality. So living entity is eternal, and there's no possibility of him merging and losing his individuality. But it's a notion. It's a notion. And in the beginning, there were personalities who were Brahman realized or attached to Brahman realization. Even our Sukadev Goswami, it said when he was in the womb, he had some attachment to this. And he didn't want to come out of the womb. Krishna had to coax him out, promise him that, he would not be again covered by the material energy. Of course, he heard the Bhagavatam, so that made it very clear that there was something far beyond just the Brahman understanding of the absolute, that there was Bhagavan, and that personality had a form, he had very unique qualities. He has a name. He performs pastimes. Oftentimes, Prabhupada would say, yes, we know the Supreme Lord. We know his name. We know what he looks like. We know what qualities he has. We know what he does. He said, we even know his address, Prabhupada would say, Goloka Vrindavan. And he said, we even know his phone number. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's his phone number. So Prabhupada gave his personal line to chant Krishna's holy name. So there were Brahma. There were also the Kumaras. The Kumaras also in the beginning, they were Brahmavadis. But when they heard about the supreme absolute truth being a person, they were attracted. And therefore, when they came to the gate of Vaikuntha, and they got the Lord's darshan, and just by smelling the fragrance of the tulsi leaves and the Lord's lotus feet, they were, it said, overwhelmed, transformed in body and mind, it was said. Now, so the Brahmavadis, they can come to a higher understanding. It's possible through proper association. But the Mayavadis just have such a deep envy of the Lord that they don't take the association. They don't even want to hear of the conception of God being a person. I had one of my first experiences of this many years ago when we were just starting out in Hong Kong. This was in the early 80s. And we visited a very large Buddhist monastery, very big, huge temple, huge ashram, restaurant. It was a big, big project. So we went there with some of the devotees, and we were all dressed in our devotional attire, saffron and shaved heads, and we looked very much like they. So we went there, and they gave us, kind of a VIP reception, and we sat with some of the monks, the head monks, and they thought that we were some kind of Buddhists. And so then we started to discuss, and we explained that we were practitioners of bhakti. We were Krishna devotees. And then, so what does that mean? What's your basic philosophy? And I said, well, our philosophy is that ultimately the absolute truth is a person. He's a person. He has a form. He has a name. He has very special qualities. He performs extraordinary pastimes. And as soon as those words left my lips, this head monk, he pounded. He took his fist and he pounded it on the table. And he said, "No, cannot be. Cannot be." He was so upset by the conception that God was a person. And then I realized when Prabhupada was speaking of this in the Gita, you may remember in 4.10 he speaks about this, that there are 3 reasons for which someone might opt for impersonalism. And he says it's attachment, it's fear, and it's anger. Attachment to material conception of life. You're so attached to the bodily concept of life and sense gratification and all the rest that one cannot accept God to be a person, because one's experienced the limitations of this body, and when it's said that God has a form, they just can't understand. They can't conceive of such a thing. The second is a fear of a spiritual personal identity, because people have been exploited in this world. Anytime they subordinate themselves to another, then they're taken advantage of. May have been taken advantage of by family members or friends or whatever it may have been. And when they hear this notion that God's a person and ultimately we have to surrender to the supreme person, they have fear. that they again may be exploited as they have been exploited in the past. And then thirdly, Prabhupada says that there's a conception of void that arises because one has been frustrated in life. One has heard from so many so-called, spiritual leaders, religionists, and they have touted so many types of philosophies and everything, but that the person who is teaching and their example is two different things, and they just become very frustrated, disappointed, and then they just decide, I don't want anything at all, just leave me alone. Now, we often hear about these things, and there's a tendency, I think, to point our fingers or to think, well, this is these people out here, these folks over there, these are those terrible Mayavadis and everything else. That's them, that's not us. We're personalists. But I think we have to also remember that we chose to turn our backs on Krishna quite a long time ago, and we may continue to do so through the choices that we make every day. We may choose to sometimes serve Krishna and other times not. We may, not take opportunities that are coming our way every moment. It's a moment by moment decision. We may have the opportunity to serve or not, and we make that choice. So depending on how we make that choice, that can also be an expression of our, impersonal kind of mentality. So it's not just those folks out there, it's also this folk right here. This person also has got this deep within the heart, and that's why we've been here, as Prabhupada says, Nitya Buddha, eternally conditioned. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to have such a term. We know that originally we were with Krishna, who knows how long, hundreds. Why is that term there, eternally conditioned? Because it's been so long, and we've continued to make the wrong choice to turn our backs on Krishna. It's only by some inconceivable mercy of Prabhupada that we're in this life, struggling to be some sort of devotee. Thirdly, we have akama, one who has transcended all material desires. And this brings up the notion of desirelessness. And what does that mean? Without material desire, but it doesn't mean without desire, because Prabhupada points out that we're not a dead stone. The living entity is Satchidananda. So it means that there is eternity within his being. There is knowledge, there is bliss. So desire is there. The question is how to purify the desire. Spiritual desire is to love and serve Krishna. Material desire is to basically turn our backs on him. So the natural function then, as Prabhupada points out, I'm going to read this actually, points out in the purport. He says, a living being, naturally being the part and parcel of the supreme whole, Purusham Purnam, has as his natural function, he calls it the natural function, to serve the Supreme Being, just as the parts and parcels of the body or the limbs of the body are naturally meant to serve the complete body. So this is the constitutional position. You may remember the story that Prabhupada told about the Indriyas going on strike. There's strikes everywhere nowadays. So the Indriyas, they were disappointed. The Indriyas refer to, of course, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the nose, sense of touch. They were upset because they were doing all this heavy lifting, all this work, and it was only the stomach that was the beneficiary of all their work. They were enjoying all their hard labor. So they got together and they said, enough of this. We just won't supply the stomach. They thought they had a great solution to the problem until they became weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And they realized that unless and until they supplied food to the stomach, that they themselves would not feel nourished, that they feel strong, and so on and so forth. So this is the natural position. We can't get around it. Prabhupada also mentions that one should feel happy only by experiencing the happiness of the Supreme Lord. So this is something that Prabhupada said again and again and again, that by pleasing Krishna, we automatically become pleased. He spoke of watering the root. If we water the root of the tree, all of the branches, the leaves, the flowers, the fruits, they are automatically satisfied. So by giving pleasure to Krishna, we actually become pleased. There's a nice verse in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, again, one that Prabhupada often quotes, the first line, Bhakti Parishan Anubhavo Viraktir. This is where it's said that devotion, and direct experience of the Supreme Lord, and detachment from other things, these three occur simultaneously for one who has taken shelter of the Lord. And that's compared with the pleasure and the nourishment and relief from hunger that one gets when sitting down to a sumptuous meal. That with every bite, one is experiencing these three. So in the same way, if one is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord, one can directly experience it. It's not something that someone has to tell you about. It's something that you can experience yourself. And if we're not experiencing it, then we have to retrace our footsteps. There's something that we are omitting from the process, or something that we are not applying properly. Because if we're applying it properly, we will experience this, at least to some degree. I was also thinking this morning, excuse me. Oftentimes, Ratapaja Maharaj and I exchange stories of our earlier days. And one of the stories that I have is when we were in the Radha Damodar party. For those younger devotees who may not know, these were the large Greyhound buses that were converted into temples. And they used to travel over the United States. And there were, a group of brahmacharis assigned to each bus, and largely were engaged in book distribution and doing festivals and college campuses and so on. So the buses would often be parked outside of a particular city. And they used to have, which I still think is in existence, the Campgrounds of America, KOAs. And this is where people go and they park their campers and things. They have hookups for electricity and water and sanitation and all of that. So we were set up there, and this was in Florida. That particular day, I think I was back. I was worshiping the deities because we had a set of deities in each bus as well. And I see a whole kind of group of campers coming in, and on the back of the wheel cover, like the vinyl wheel cover, it was printed "Campers for Christ." Campers for Christ. So one after another, they came in, and they all lined up. I thought, what's going to happen here? They're going to have some kind of event or whatever. Turns out they had rented the hall, and they were going to have some kind of a gathering, praising of the Lord and so on. So I was walking back and forth in my my robes, and I noticed this one lady. She kept watching me. She was studying me as I was walking back and forth, because I was busy, back and forth, and we're doing, getting things ready for worship or cooking or this or that or whatever it was. And she kept watching me, and finally she got up the courage and she stopped me and she looked at me and she said, "Son, are your parents still alive?" Do they know what you're doing with your life? And she couldn't get it. She couldn't understand that, here was someone engaged in the service of the Lord, someone who was trying to serve, someone was trying to follow some kind of path of renunciation and so on and so forth. She couldn't get it. Then she finally said, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference. Jesus still loves you. Come this evening, we're going to have a praising of the Lord, starting at 6, going to, 9 or 10 o'clock. And then afterwards, we're going to sit down and have a big barbecue dinner. And I was thinking she was trying to be sincere about what she was talking about, but she didn't have a clue. And she had no understanding of what it meant to be engaged in the service of the Lord. For many, when they see someone engaged in the service of Krishna who seems to be not disinterested in material pursuits in terms of acquiring so many different things just for the sake of sense gratification, or running here, there, and everywhere just to gratify the senses, they think such a person is missing something. They're missing out on the real things of life. And that makes me think of Jayadvaita Maharaj and our other devotee who was a big book distributor. They were walking down the street in New York, and apparently there were some kind of sincere policemen. They drove by and they stopped and they said, we're actually interested, in Krishna consciousness. We've seen the devotees, we've seen them chant in the street, we've read a bit, right? And we want to, kind of visit. And, we want to become some kind of members. Can we join? And so one of the policemen said, is there anything that, we have to give up? And then Jayadvaita Maharaj, famous for his one-liners, he says, yes, you have to give up suffering. You have to give up suffering. That's what happens when you become a devotee of Krishna. You have to give up suffering. I thought that was pretty good. So now the question is how to come to this point of akama. And in various places this is mentioned. There is a formula for it. Krishna consciousness is quite systematic. There's a clear structure, there's a clear formula. I'm thinking of the Nectar of Devotion, where Rupa Goswami speaks of Utsaha Nishchayat Daryat Tat Karma Pravartana Sangat Tyagyat Tato Sato Vritti Sadbir Bhakti Prishidyati. He says what? There's 6 things, 6 principles. And he says first is be enthusiastic. So sometimes devotees ask Prabhupada, how do you remain enthusiastic if you're not so enthusiastic? He said just by being enthusiastic. In other words, it's within your ability. If you're engaged in Krishna's service, then you'll be enthusiastic. The second is endeavoring with confidence. If we've understood enough about Krishna consciousness, we understand that ultimately Krishna is there for us. The process itself leads to the ultimate goal of prema bhakti. So if we've understood enough, certainly we'll have confidence in the Lord and the Lord's teachings. Third, he says, be patient, because things don't happen overnight. Prabhupada sometimes gave the example of the fingernails. If you simply watch them, you will not see them grow because they grow so slowly. In a similar way, our advancement may be imperceivable. We may not be able to understand it, but it's happening. It may be very gradual, but it's happening. So we have to remain patient. The fourth is acting according to regular principles, which includes our process of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, our 9-fold different steps in devotional service, or different angas of devotional service. He says, fifth, choose your association wisely, because who you associate with will also have an effect on your consciousness. So he says, be mindful of that. And he says, finally, you follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. He said, if you follow these, he says, undoubtedly, he uses the word undoubtedly, will assure complete success of not only devotional service, but pure devotional service. We know of all the angas, the most important is the chanting of Krishna's holy name. It's called by Jiva Goswami the chief, the most important. Jiva Goswami even goes so far as to say that chanting should be added to the other angas. No matter what the other angas might be, we should add the chanting of Krishna's holy name to the other angas. So in other words, if you're worshiping the deity, you should be adding the chanting of Hare Krishna and so on. But ultimately, the whole thing boils down to, the way that we chant Krishna's holy name. Prabhupada appealed to us again and again and again and again that we have to chant without offense. Be clear on what the offenses are and avoid them. Chant with full attention. In one place, he makes it sound so simple. He said, just, excuse me, just pronounce each and every word distinctly. He uses the word distinctly. Very clear, very clear. And listen with great rapt attention. And chant from the heart, just like a child crying out for his or her mother. We may say, yeah, but we know this, we've heard this so many times. We know to pronounce the name clearly, distinctly. But sometimes we hear all kinds of mantras, in which you don't know what is being chanted, actually. I've mentioned this before, perhaps, but sometimes devotees add words or they subtract words, just unconsciously, because they just chant like autopilot, just let it go on, and not paying attention to what they're chanting. There was one devotee many years ago. He was adding Krishnas and adding Ramas. Somehow got stuck. I heard him every morning until I said something about it. Hare Krishna, 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 Krishna. Went on and on, many Krishnas. And then many Ramas later on. Hare Rama, 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 Rama. It went on and on like that. And I said, well, to my ear, you're adding more Krishnas and more Ramas. And he didn't believe me, couldn't accept it. So I decided I was going to record his chanting. Forgive me if I've said this before, but it's good. Repetition is a good thing. No, Nitai? Haven't said it before? Okay. So one morning I sat next to him. I had, in those days, it was like a little cassette, kind of like a dictaphone kind of small thing. I had it in my pocket. I turned it on. And just as he had done many times, he chanted like that. Hare Krishna, 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 went on and on. Hare Rama, 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 Rama. So I got about 5 minutes of that. And then later on, I approached him and said, Prabhu, I recorded your chanting this morning. He said, oh, really? I said, yeah. Can I play it for you? He said, sure. So then I pushed a play button and it was there, clear. Many Krishnas, many Ramas. And I said, so what do you think? He said, what do you mean, what do I think? That's not me. There's no way that can be me. So even though it was him chanting, he said, that can't be me. I don't chant like that. Even though it was obviously his voice and everything like that, he wouldn't accept it. So all to say that we may think that we're chanting properly. We may think we're chanting the Maha Mantra, but we better think about it. And just as a safeguard, we can record our japa from time to time. We can chant with others and have them listen to our japa. All of this. It's important to make sure we're chanting Krishna's holy name, as Prabhupada said, pronouncing each and every word distinctly, listening very attentively, and again, trying to chant from the heart. And there's plenty out there that help us do that. There's different books on japa. Burijan Prabhu's japa is excellent. It's short, but it's beautiful. It's really something you can apply very easily. Satyananda Maharaj has several books, and so on and so forth. So resources are out there to help us to do that, to chant attentively, and to chant from the heart, just like a child calls out for his or her mother. So those are the thoughts I have on this verse today, this evening for you, morning for us. Now, Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu, anything from your side or from the devotees there? You have to unmute. Still muted, Nitai. Push that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj for a wonderful lecture. One of the advices I got for chanting one time is the 3 P's, which is posture, prayer, and pronunciation.
Yep, those are good. Those are good. Again?
Yeah, it's a posture,
Posture.
pronunciation, and prayer.
Yeah, so posture is important because if you're sitting up straight, obviously you'll be more alert. And I mean, this is a yoga process, obviously. It's a yoga posture and it's meant for that purpose. It's meant to be alert. So it is helpful. If one can sit like that. Now, if one can't sit like on the floor, cross-legged and so on, for those of us who are older, maybe a little more difficult. Worse still for those of us who don't exercise. But if we're unable to sit like that, then sit in the chair and also sit straight. Certainly very helpful to do that. Pronunciation, as we mentioned, and the mood of prayer, to chant from the heart. So just remembering those 3 P's, very, very helpful. These are the kind of things we're speaking about. So thank you for that. Anyone else?
Krishna Maharaj, you made a point that happiness of Supreme Lord. How do I know that the Supreme Lord is happy with me? My activities, how do I?
Well, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's very happy with you. That's my perception.
That's your mercy. Thank you, Maharaj.
But how do we know? Well, we know if the devotees are happy, if others are happy with us, then we know that the Lord is happy. If the devotees are not happy with us, then the Lord is not happy. That's also another way that we can understand. Another way is that, we can feel, pleasure in our practice of Krishna consciousness. We feel pleasure when we're chanting Krishna's name, or we're hearing, the Bhagavatam, or we're worshiping the deity. We're engaged in devotional service. If we're feeling pleasure through executing the process, then that's also an indication that the Lord is pleased with us. And again, if we have doubts, then we can inquire from senior devotees on this point, those who know us well. But in general, as Prabhupada gave that example, the 11th canto, just like when we take foodstuff, we will feel nourished, feel strong, feel satisfaction. So we'll experience it ourselves. But I always try to see if the devotees themselves are pleased. If the devotees are pleased with me and my service to them, then I take that as a very powerful indicator.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Anyone else? What do you think, Manjari? You're walking around there.
Raj, I was just sitting on my computer doing schoolwork, so I just have to get up and move a little bit.
No problem.
Sitting too much.
Any thoughts?
No, Raj, I love the class per usual. No
Okay.
thoughts from me. No one would want to hear my thoughts.
Anyone else? Anything to share?
Madhav Prabhu is up unmuting himself.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Maharaj, Madhav Das. So, yeah, I had several questions, but your talk was such beautiful, systematically, finally concluding with Akama. And of course, Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu, he talked about the very fundamental question asked, yeah, that how I know that Lord is pleased, because everything should be done to please, then everything is satisfied. We are satisfied. We are all happy. So actually, so all those questions, as I kept listening to you, it all got to my head. And in the end, when you say, actually, you quoted that Rupa Goswami's those various steps, because I thought that initially when I started the process, how could I feel that really I'm making Krishna happy? But you describe the process also, Rupa Goswami's process, all those various steps. And again, in the end, as you gave very good example, like you, when you see from your service to devotees, if they are happy. So you gave several indications, wonderful examples of Prabhupada when food eating and then your all indriyas, everyone is satisfied. So I had so many questions, how really, same way as Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu said, how to understand, how to know Krishna is pleased, and then we all can become pleased. So you gave numerous examples. So actually I became questionless, but I just wanted to touch upon this. It was wonderful step by step elevation, how to know Krishna is pleased. So it was phenomenal. It was just, I became questionless. And so that's all I wanted to kind of share with everyone here gathered. Thank you, Maharaj, so much. These kind of talks from pure devotees like you, we need constantly, because I speak for myself, I need constant reminder, because I'm so poor and low class that I need this reminder listening to you, this kind of talks constantly, otherwise very difficult to go by the day. And but very fortunate to have you, Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu's tremendous effort to arrange these things. We are very blessed, and thank you, Maharaj, so much. And I hope you keep coming. We never miss you. We at least we get to hear you once a month without fail. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and your help to all of us. Thank you so much, Maharaj. Dandavat.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, we can see there, Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu, this is confirmation. He appreciates your
Thank you,
efforts.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So he and other devotees, they appreciate, therefore the Lord is certainly pleased, no doubt about it.
Thank you, Maharaj. As long as you can keep on coming every month, that means Lord is pleased, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj. Anyone else has any question for Maharaj?
You had to slip that one in.
Maharaj, Thanvika Prabhu, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, it's really good. Please accept my humble obeisance to Prabhupada. I really enjoy this class, Maharaj, because it's systematically explained that, okay, why do you want to do that process? Okay, that is amazing. We really appreciate your time and effort to cultivate us, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Thank you.
Vijay, you had a question?
I look forward to the day, Nitai, when I can come and visit.
Yes, Maharaj, that will be, yeah, it'll be, I'm waiting for that great day too, Maharaj. Abhishek, you have a question?
Yeah, I don't actually have the question. I was going to ask by proxy for my mom, but she's here. She'll ask herself. Just a moment.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please
Hare
accept my humble obeisances. All Gosha Prabhupada. A wonderful class as always, Maharaj. My question is, whatever happened with that Mataji who invited you to the class and dinner afterwards? Did he ever go to listen to what they had to say, or did they ever come to hear you?
No, I certainly had no interest to go there. But I think she gave up. She probably thought that was a lost cause. I wasn't gonna budge in my conviction, so she kind of left me. Anyway, as it turned out, they were only there for I think a day or two, and then they all pulled out, so they were gone. So no, I was not subjected to that. But in my in my life, I have been subjected to a fair amount of these kind of things, to be honest. And
Okay, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna,
I
Maharaj Dhamma Pranam.
mentioned before that I was we practiced this up to this point. Nitai, anything else?
Hemlata has a question for you.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
But-
Maharaj, you said that when devotees are pleased, it's a clear indication that Krishna is pleased. And when we were new to Krishna consciousness, even if we chanted 1 round, 2 rounds, devotees would be very, very pleased, extremely pleased, and be very encouraging. And slowly, as we progress, they get more and more pleased or happy. So we reach our 16 rounds, and then we start, we are doing our hearing, chanting, deity worship, cooking, offering bhoga, slowly. And then you reach a point now, what is next? What's next? And then it just gets more and more difficult to find new ways to please the devotees and indirectly to please the Supreme Lord. So what do we do? I know last time I asked you, you said you purify your chanting more. You do, try to chant more nicely for Krishna. And that is something so tough. It's just, it feels like now I'm on an uphill battle, until you come to that point where, okay, you're doing regulative principles and chanting and reading every day. Now what do I do next? And it's like, okay, do more internal work, deepen your service attitude, chant more nicely. That just seems like a very uphill battle. I don't know what to do.
Well, yeah, I think there comes a time in I think every devotee's life where they seem to plateau. They come to a certain point and they feel like they're not progressing. They're not making much advancement. At least it's not perceivable to them. They don't feel that the taste for devotional service or the taste in chanting and performing other devotional services increasing. It seems to have kind of stagnated in some ways. If that's the case, then it's important to discuss with other devotees, particularly senior devotees. If you have those who are like Shiksha gurus to you, for example, Diksha guru, discuss and get their support get their advice, get their blessings like this. That's one thing I would say. Another thing I would say is that we need to see how we can better serve the devotees, because this is really the key. Vaishnava Seva is the key. So if we're already doing it, great. But there's no limit to what we can do. You know, according to Srila Rupa Goswami's, 6 different exchanges like this. You know, give gifts, receive gifts, offer prasad, receive prasad, inquire confidentially, offer confidential instruction, so on. So you can inquire from those that you have respect for, trust in. You can inquire from them, and they certainly can also give you some advice. You can help. But my experience is that by serving the devotees, this is what makes the whole process continue to be dynamic, and it allows us to keep advancing, on the path. Personally, I feel most enlivened if I can somehow render service to the devotees. And by doing so, you get blessings. You need blessings. Ours is not simply a process of sadhana bhakti. We need kripa. We need mercy. And the mercy comes through the devotees. So Vaishnava Seva is an essential aspect, an essential component of devotional service. And so we should really tax our minds. What can we do? And it's not so difficult. Can I think how to serve another devotee? Can I cook something nicely for them? Or can I assist them in some other way? Is there something they need in their devotional service? I mentioned before, but just little gifts. They can be inexpensive little things, devotional items like, special photographs or paintings or these kind of things of the Lord. And it's unlimited because Krishna is unlimited, little things like this. Devotees cherish these things so much. It's something that's given by another devotee. It may not have much monetary value, but it has a lot of spiritual value, and devotees are very appreciative. I think I mentioned already, but what Burijan Prabhu gave us 3 items. I mentioned this: tilak, a set of counter beads, and it was a Brahmin thread, because most of the devotees he gifted this to were second initiated. So how much did that cost? It was, didn't cost anything, but everyone really appreciated it because to get something of spiritual value from a devotee. Every year, as long as I can remember, during our GBC meetings in Mayapur, His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj would gift every devotee. He gave it like a bag. There was a bag of many devotional items inside, and including things that you wear, things that you use, little prasadam, mahaprasadam, and so on. And it was so much appreciated because it came from an exalted Vaishnava. So there are little things like this that we can do to please the devotees. And if we can please the devotees and we get their mercy and blessings, then there's no doubt that we'll progress in devotional service. A third thing I would say is that very special mercy comes if we extend ourselves to others by giving them Krishna consciousness. Someone who does not yet have Krishna consciousness, to extend ourselves to give them the holy name, or give them prasad, or give them a book. And as you know, on the 21st of September is Bhadra Purnima. So here's a perfect opportunity to gift someone a set of the Bhagavatams. Could be a friend, could be a family member, could be whoever. and that verse says that if you do so, you basically have purchased your ticket to Goloka Vrindavan. And you can get set to board the Goloka Express, going back to Goloka Vrindavan. I mean, Bhagavatam says it. Who am I to doubt? Who are we to doubt? It says like that. So might want to think about that. Trying to give someone Krishna consciousness, particularly through Prabhupada's books. And I find the more we do that, the more we feel enlivened, just to help another person. Krishna says no one's more dear to him, right? He's very pleased by this. Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, they're so pleased if you extend yourselves to others. So just little things like this make a huge difference. So I would say in those three things, and there could be others, but that's what I would suggest. Is that okay?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Nitai Gaurasundar Prabhu.
Yes, Maharaj, is getting late, so for you also. So I'll see you next month, Maharaj.
No.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
They will come.
Yeah, just
Another Prabhu has come. Okay.
Please accept humble obeisance, Maharaj. Very, very, very wonderful class. On this last point, my personal realization is that Mataji was asking. I think this is something that generally, I think many people go through. Actually, before initiation, when we start devotional service, we're really enthusiastic when we see the devotees. We get enthused and we get attracted. And then we start doing the process, most of the times, without offenses. And we do those things and we get attracted, and eventually we take up this process and get initiated. But then we start getting more and more service doing, then we start taking things for granted. The same things that we were doing with so much enthusiasm, sincerity, the problem with then we take, and even though we might be doing it, it becomes like more of a routine or more of a mechanically doing the same thing. But then, we really lose that, whether it's reading Prabhupada's books or whether it's chanting or whatever. And then personally that I noticed was in the association of devotees, it becomes much easier. Much easier to actually get those things corrected. This particularly I have noticed it back when I was in Australia, in Melbourne, because every morning we used to go to the temple in the morning chanting with the devotees. It used to be very easy because with the devotees, senior devotees like Parma Prabhu, Adruta Prabhu, all of them were there. When they're in the association of the devotees, when you're chanting, it's much easier. And then whenever they were cooking, Parma Prabhu was used to be there in the kitchen, anything that, he used to help and tell us like, okay, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. Even chapati, like when you're making, okay, this should be round, very nice, puri should be very nice, because you are making it for offering to Krishna. So like that, he used to instruct those things, even small things like that. And then, in the classes, they used to train us in the sense, like when you were going to Bhagavatam class, I remember like a couple of times, like in the class, like Purna Prabhu, under the Prabhu, you sit there in the class and then hear. And then one of the times, like, I mentioned something in the class and I was giving class, he said, Purna Prabhu asked me, where did you get that point? Show me where Prabhupada said that. So I had to open up Srimad Bhagavatam and I had to show where that, I have referred that. So that was correct. He was basically telling me that, we stay within what Prabhupada has said, not, out of our mind. And another time, Brahma Vimohan Leela was explaining something and Gurjan Prabhu was there and he happened to be there. He came and sat in the class. He sat in the class. He corrected me. He said, he explained more and he said, no, this is, even though we say this, but this is real understanding. And so like this, what I realized was in the association of devotees, it's much easier and, they help us and they correct us. And if we are humble enough, like, we take it, without false ego, and able to correct ourselves, that will be beneficial for us. Actually, it will help us in the process of getting more and more better at doing the same thing. Even though we are doing the same thing, we can actually improve those same things, like improve the chanting, improve reading. Initially, we might read it, but then it's thoroughly study the same book when we are reading, and then we understand it. Things like that. So all the same services, we have done it. All these different things, deity worship, chanting, reading the books, prasad, devotees, all of these things we have been doing it, but we can actually improve all the same items to a finer level. Hopefully do it, in the perfectly to please devotees and Krishna. That's what my realization is. That's what I am.
Yeah, thank you. I think the the main takeaway from that was the Sangha of devotees is essential. And, we ourselves have to be receptive, to their advice. We have to be humble enough to accept what they say. If we need to be corrected in our philosophical understanding and so on and so forth, and guided on all different types of practical aspects of Krishna consciousness. And to have the Sangha of devotees is in the practice of sadhana bhakti, as you said, to chant with the devotees and so on. So our process is dependent on Vaishnava Sangha, and experiencing at present with COVID and everything, with the restrictions, at least in many parts of the world, it's hampered a bit. The freedom to move and to do things is hampered a bit. I don't know about there, but certainly here it is, in other places in our region. Well, then we do this, the next best thing is that we just try to get as much Sangha as we can online. There are devotees who chant together online. There are devotees that read together online. I think you all are doing some of that, as I understand. You're still doing that, Nitai Goswami Prabhu?
Yes, Maharaj.
Every evening, is it?
Yes, Maharaj. 8 o'clock every day.
You're doing what? You're reading?
We're doing teaching of Lord Kapila.
You're reading it on
Reading and discussion, yes, Maharaj.
Yeah, so this is the next best thing we can do. If we can't come physically together, at least we can do it online. Essentially, we're doing the same thing. But I'm saying the devotees have, kind of moved online, and they've gathered for doing japa together. They've gathered to do kirtan together, reading together, classes together, many things you can do together. But it's not exactly the same, but it's as good as we can do in this situation. So somehow or another, we should seek the association of devotees, and we should be open and willing to receive their Sangha, which means that it may also entail, correction like this. Okay, Nitai Gaur Sundar Prabhu, thank you so much. Thank you, Prabhu, and thank you, Matajis, and Krishna willing, we'll be back again in a month's time. Is that okay?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Jai Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.